Hey everyone, today we're going to be seeing how much vacuum is actually in a fluorescent tube. And I'd like to thank the sponsor for today's video, Mel Science. I'll tell you a little bit more about them later on. I saw this experiment first on photonic induction and thought it was really cool, so I wanted to try it out myself. In order for a fluorescent tube to actually work, there needs to be a very low pressure inside. On either side of the fluorescent tube, there's two coils of wire that are called heaters. So when you want to turn on the light, you run a little bit of current through each of the heaters and it warms up, and then something called thermionic emission happens. That's where electrons are actually emitted from the coil. Because there's a 240 volt difference between either end of the tube, once that's heated up, those electrons start flying off of it towards the other end. And when those electrons hit other atoms that are inside of the tube, it can cause a photon of light to occur. If the specific atom that it hits happens to be mercury, then the photon of light that it emits is actually ultraviolet light. Now, ultraviolet light is actually invisible to our eyes. We can't see it. So how do we see light from the fluorescent tube? Well, that photon of light actually hits this white coating on the inside of the glass. And the white coating lights up and it fluoresces to emit visible light. For example, here's some phosphor that's used to coat the fluorescent tube. Then I have a quartz fluorescent bulb here that doesn't have any phosphor coated on it, and so it's not going to let off much visible light. So watch how bright this powder gets when I bring the light close to it. So you can see it lights up very bright. Let's compare this to cornstarch. Look how much brighter the phosphor gets than the cornstarch. The nice thing is these are made of glass, and so the ultraviolet light can't pass through the glass. The only way that energy can get out is when it hits the phosphor and then it fluoresces the visible light that we can see. So in order to make these ions that are emitting the light, you need to have a really low pressure. If you don't have a low enough pressure, then the electrons can't gain enough energy in order to strike the atoms and emit a photon of light. You can see the dependence of pressure on ion formation when I use a plasma globe in my vacuum chamber. Now, normally inside of it, it's at a low pressure so that when you turn on the power, it creates ions in there, or a plasma, and so you can actually see the sparks going from the inside to the outside to your finger. But what I'm gonna do here is break the globe a little bit. So I break it on the side, and now it's at atmospheric pressure inside here. So that when I turn it on, it doesn't work anymore. Now the reason it doesn't work is because there's no generation of ions anymore because the pressure is too high. So at this high of pressure, the atoms are too bunched together, and so the electrons just run into another atom really suddenly. They don't have enough space to start speeding up fast enough to hit another atom to create an ion. So you have to lower the pressure in order to generate these ions and create a plasma. So let's lower the pressure here and watch what happens to the globe now. Okay, so we're getting down to about as low a pressure as I can go in my vacuum. Oh, and there it goes. There's the plasma. Okay, so at as low a pressure I can get now, it's kind of at this constant glow now. So I'm gonna let in the air a little tiny bit and we're gonna see how it changes. Okay, letting in air, 3, 2, 1. I'm just barely letting in a little bit. And it's gone. Amazingly, for a fluorescent tube like this, they get it to an extremely low pressure. It's only around 0.3% of atmospheric pressure. So what that means for our fluorescent tube here is that most of this whole volume inside of here is just empty space. In order to show you that, what I want to do is I'm going to break the end of the fluorescent tube underwater, and we'll see how much water can fill up in the tube. Now don't try this experiment at home. Fluorescent bulbs are filled with mercury vapor. Now when you break a fluorescent bulb on accident, if you're outside, the mercury vapor dissipates very quickly, so it's not that dangerous. But you don't want to be breaking these inside right when you're around it to breathe the gas. So first we're going to try the smaller tube and see how high the water can actually rise in it. And then we'll try the larger 8-foot one. Now the 8-foot tube has a lot more volume than the 4-foot one, so let's see how high the water can actually suck up in both of them. In order to break this in a controlled way, I need to get this end cap off here. Got it. Okay, so you can see this little glass tip right there. That's the tip that I'm going to be breaking while it's under the water. All right, so I have some water in here. I'm just gonna dye it black so we can actually see it inside the tube. All right, so what I'm gonna be doing is sticking this on the end of that little glass tip. Then when I stick it under the water, I'll bend it and it'll pop that end of the glass tube there. So it'll make a little tiny hole that the water can rush into. Now before we do our experiment, I'd like to thank Mel Science for sponsoring this video. They just launched a new kit called Mel Med. The events of the past year have made the focus on medical professions clearer than ever. However, some still find the topic of medicine intimidating. Well, Mel Med covers a variety of topics spanning different medical fields, such as dentistry, surgery, and pharmacy. Mel Med boxes include real medical equipment, not just a single stethoscope, but artificial skin, an electrocardiograph to provide a safe zone for training, and a Mel Med app that includes instructions and a training ground to diagnose virtual patients. So this box is called Therapy. Has a really nice blood pressure cuff here, a pulse oximeter. This is for checking the pupils, measurements. You can measure your BMI. This is a thermometer for checking your temperature. This you can measure the angles of different joints. Mel offers subscription boxes where you can do your own experiments at home. A new set is delivered to your door every single month. So come find out which medical field is best for you. And you can kickstart your professional and medical career by pre-ordering now to get your first set by Christmas. So click the link in my description to pre-order your box today. Now let's get back to our experiment. Okay, first let's see how our smaller tube holds up. Whoa. Okay, so out of all this volume here, everything filled with the black water was the amount of vacuum in there. And then that tiny little spot right here is the amount of gas that was in there at atmospheric pressure. Okay, now let's try our giant 8-foot tube and see how high the water goes in it. Let's see if this works. Okay, here we go. It goes up. Look at it go. Look how high it's getting. Whoa, look how high that got. All the way up this tube. But now it looks like the water in there is gonna boil a little bit and put a little bit of water vapor in there. So you can see the initial point it got to is right there. Now that the water's boiling a little bit, it's dropped down, so it's filling it with water vapor instead of the liquid now. So when I first open it, it immediately starts to boil the water because of the low vacuum that's in there. Whoa. So this was pretty amazing. It's so surprising to see that volume just fill up with water. There was just a tiny little gap left. And thanks for watching another episode of the Action Lab. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and you can also hit the bell so you can be notified when I release my latest video. And check out my Action Lab Shorts channel, where I do videos similar to this channel, but I do them in less than a minute. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.